"Can I eat your leftovers, sir?" But when the millionaire looked into her eyes, his life changed forever. On the 50th floor of a skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan, David Morgan, one of the most powerful men in New York's real estate world, stood silently in front of a massive glass window, gazing down at the city. From above, the lights of thousands of buildings looked like faint dots, like lost stars. Clad in a charcoal gray designer suit and polished Italian shoes, David looked like a man who had it all, and for a long time he believed he did. He owned a multi-billion-dollar investment firm, luxury developments stretched across the city, and deals that even Wall Street admired. People respected him. People feared him. They called him the man who never sleeps. But on that cold, rainy night, as the city sparkled beneath him and the rain slid quietly down the glass, David suddenly realized he had no one to call and ask, "Are you okay?" No one was waiting for him at home. No laughter, no warm dinner, no gentle eyes to welcome him after a long day. Just a massive penthouse, too quiet, too perfect, too empty. "Mr. Morgan," came the familiar voice of Carmen, his loyal assistant of 15 years. "It's 8 p.m. Aren't you going home?" David didn't turn around. His eyes stayed on the city he had helped build. "You can go ahead, Carmen." "I don't mean to intrude, but you've been working for 14 straight hours. At least eat something proper," she said gently, her voice filled with genuine concern. He turned and looked at her, the only person who had stayed by his side all these years. On some days, she felt like the mother he never had. "Thank you, Carmen. I'm really fine." But both of them knew it wasn't true. David once had love, friends, family. But work, money, and ambition had slowly pushed everything else away. The women in his life only saw his bank account, not the man behind it. Old friends grew tired of last-minute cancellations. His family had stopped calling altogether. He had built an empire, but he had lost the world. After Carmen left, David sat down in the leather chair by the window. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, sipping slowly, as if trying to swallow the growing emptiness within. Outside, the rain kept falling. Softly, patiently, as if it were waiting for something. The room was so silent, David could hear the ticking of the expensive wall clock behind him. The space felt encased in invisible glass, cold, flawless, and lonely. He stood, grabbed his cashmere coat, and walked out of the office. The elevator ride down felt slower than usual. When the doors opened, the underground garage revealed itself in sterile white-blue lighting and rows of luxury cars. David walked past the familiar line of vehicles and approached his black Range Rover, the one he used for non-official outings. Tonight, he didn't want to be seen. He didn't want to go anywhere familiar. The engine started with a low rumble. Outside, the rain had picked up, beating against the windshield like falling memories. He drove off with no destination in mind. Manhattan slowly faded behind him, its glittering skyline giving way to quieter streets. David wandered through neighborhoods he hadn't visited in years. No fine dining, no luxury lobbies, no heads turning as he entered. Just the city. The real city. At a corner, the dim glow of a neon sign made him slow down. Green's Diner, home-style meals. Since 1981. A small diner tucked between two old brick buildings, the windows fogged with steam, the inside lit by a soft yellow warmth. A few people sat inside, finishing late dinners. David pulled over without thinking. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was sick of polished silverware and forced smiles. Or maybe, just maybe, his hunger had finally caught up with him after a whole day fueled by coffee and pressure. He stepped inside. A small bell jingled as the door opened. The scent of roasted meat, melted butter, and hot soup filled the air, an aroma of real people and real lives. No classy jazz in the background, no icy AC, just the warm hum of conversation, dishes clinking, and end-of-day laughter. Behind the counter, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes approached. "Good evening, hun. Table for one?" she asked kindly. David nodded. "Yes, thank you." She led him to a table by the window. The wood was worn, the tablecloth a little faded, but everything was clean, homey. David sat and opened the menu. Simple dishes: chicken soup, beef stew, grilled sandwiches, mashed potatoes, foods he hadn't tasted in years. He ordered the stew, garlic bread, and a hot tea. As she walked back to the counter, David remained quiet, scanning the small diner. An elderly couple sharing dessert, a construction worker enjoying his meal, and in the corner, a young woman holding a small child. She sat with her head lowered, hair tied back. The little boy, no more than 3, whispered something in her ear. On their table, 2 glasses of water and a small plate of fries. No main course. David didn't know why, but something about them held his attention, and what he didn't realize was that this moment, this quiet, rainy night in an old diner, was the very beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. David was sipping his hot tea when a tiny voice, soft as a breath, brushed past his ear. "Excuse me, sir, may I eat your leftovers?" He looked up, and in that instant, the world seemed to slow down. Standing before him was the young woman from the corner table. Emily Rivera, her brown hair tied neatly, her eyes filled with both sorrow and strength. In her arms was her little boy, Leo, clinging to her, his wide eyes locked on the plate of beef stew in front of David. Emily wasn't begging, she wasn't pleading, but in her voice there was a silent war between pride and desperation. "I'm sorry for bothering you," she said quickly, pulling Leo closer, about to walk away. "Wait," David spoke just in time. "Please, sit down. Eat with me." Emily hesitated. Her face was guarded, cautious, the kind of expression worn by someone who had been hurt too many times. "I insist," David said gently. "Not out of pity. I truly want to share this meal." She looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. Slowly, she nodded. "Only for my son, not for me." David smiled. "Then for the brave little man, okay?" He signaled to the diner owner, who immediately understood and walked over with a warm smile. "Mrs. Green, could we get another stew and a small bowl of chicken soup for the boy, please?" "Coming right up, sweetheart," she replied, her eyes kind and knowing. When the food arrived, Emily carefully spooned small bites into Leo's mouth. The boy ate eagerly, letting out soft, happy noises that made David chuckle. He realized he was smiling for the first time in months. Emily whispered a "thank you," but David shook his head. "No need to thank me. I'm glad to share this meal." A few moments passed in silence. Then David asked, "What's your name?" Emily Rivera, and this is Leo." "David Morgan," he replied softly. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan." "Just David, please." Emily studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, David." They ate in silence, but it was no longer awkward. It was a comforting stillness, as if in this vast, chaotic world they had found something familiar. David noticed Emily's hands, rough, calloused, yet so gentle with Leo. Hands that had cared, had lost, and kept going anyway. After the meal, David quietly paid for both meals. Emily wrapped up the leftovers without a word. As they stood to leave, David asked, "Do you need a ride home?" Emily shook her head. "Thanks, but we can walk. We live nearby." David nodded, not wanting to push. She turned back, hesitating. "Tonight, thank you, not just for the food, but for treating me like a person." He said nothing, just watched her step out into the rainy night, feeling something stir deep inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. The rain was still falling, but in David's heart, something had just begun to grow. David didn't understand why he wanted to know more about this woman. He was a man of million-dollar deals, where everything was numbers, spreadsheets, and results. But Emily wasn't a project. She was a story, and he wanted to hear all of it. After Leo finished eating, Emily gently wiped his mouth with a soft napkin. The little boy rested his head on her shoulder, his eyes fluttering with sleep. Outside, the rain still fell softly, and the diner had grown quiet. "He's a sweet boy," David said gently. Emily smiled, but there was something painful behind it. "He's my whole world." "You mentioned you were a teacher?" Emily nodded. "I used to be a public elementary school teacher in this neighborhood. I have a degree in education and thought it would be my lifelong career." "What happened?" She paused for a few seconds, then said, "The school I worked at was bought by a real estate company and torn down to build a commercial plaza. We were all let go almost overnight. I was pregnant with Leo at the time." David tightened his grip on his teacup. A cold feeling crept through him, but he didn't dare ask further. Yet. "At first, I tried to find another teaching job," Emily continued, "but no one wanted to hire a woman about to give birth. After Leo was born, he was constantly sick. Pneumonia, high fevers, stomach bugs. I had to miss work all the time, and eventually, no school wanted to keep me." Her voice remained steady, but David could see the unhealed wounds behind her eyes. "So what did you do?" "Anything. Cleaning homes by the hour, babysitting, selling baked goods and tamales at the park on weekends. But it's never enough." David swallowed hard. Images of champagne galas and million-dollar boardrooms flashed in his mind, so far removed from this woman's reality. "Does Leo's father help at all?" Emily looked up, her eyes hardening. "No. He disappeared when he found out I was pregnant. Said he was too young, not ready, handed me a wad of cash and told me to take care of it. I said no, and he vanished." David had no words. The silence between them was heavy, but not awkward. It was the silence of people who knew that some pain needed no explanation. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. Emily looked down at the sleeping boy in her arms, then shook her head. "Not for 1 second. No matter how hard it gets, he's the only reason I'm still standing." David sat quietly, taking in the woman before him. She wasn't a victim. She was a warrior, a mother who fought for her child every single day without asking anyone to notice. "You're a very strong person," he said sincerely. Emily gave a soft laugh. "Strength isn't a choice. It's what's left when you run out of options." Mrs. Green came over and gently set down 2 small slices of apple pie. "On the house," she said with a smile before walking away. Emily looked at the pie as if it were a luxury. "I used to think kindness like this didn't exist anymore. But today, for the first time in a long time, I feel like someone sees me as a person." David didn't respond. He simply nodded, his chest tight. Somewhere deep inside, a part of him long asleep was finally beginning to stir. As Emily stood holding Leo and preparing to leave the diner, David felt something tighten in his chest. A part of him didn't want them to go, not out of pity, but because for the first time in years he felt connected to something real, something that had nothing to do with contracts, assets, or influence. "Emily," he said gently as she turned away, his voice softer than he expected. She paused, turned back, her eyes cautious, used to rejection, used to promises broken. "Your son." "Leo," David said, glancing down at the child resting his head against her shoulder. "He doesn't seem very well. I know an excellent pediatrician, someone I trust completely. If you're open to it, I could arrange for him to be seen, as soon as tomorrow morning." Emily didn't respond right away. Clearly, she hadn't expected the offer. Her eyes flickered with hesitation. a battle between pride and the fear every mother knows too well. "There's no charge," David added quickly. "Honestly, I just feel better knowing he's okay." She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of condescension or hidden motive. Then she looked down at Leo, who gave a soft cough, his cheeks flushed with fever. "Only for my son's health," she said slowly. David nodded, relieved. "Thank you. I'll call my doctor first thing in the morning." She didn't answer, only gave a small nod. They exchanged a brief glance, not goodbye, but something more like a promise to meet again. As she walked out into the night, David remained frozen in place. His heart beat slowly, but steadily, as if for the first time in a long time it was being stirred by something real. That night, David returned home late. He didn't pour a drink, didn't open his laptop, didn't check the financial reports. He just sat on his sofa, staring out the window, replaying the image of a woman holding her child, eyes tired but strong, glowing only when she spoke of Leo. He recalled every word she'd shared. Emily's story had slipped into him like a quiet lesson, one no one teaches, but everyone should learn. And then he realized what he had lost all these years. Purpose, not profit, not prestige, but meaning. The next morning, David woke up early with a different kind of feeling, not the rush of meetings, not the pressure of numbers, but something softer, a sense that maybe he was doing something right. He called his pediatrician, scheduled an appointment for 10 a.m., and sent Emily a message with the clinic's address. Her reply was short, "We'll be there." An hour later, David parked outside the old building where Emily lived, a modest apartment block in a quiet part of Queens. No security guard, no polished lobby, just cracked cement stairs and the damp scent of aging brick. Emily was already waiting at the door. Leo wore an oversized sweater, clutching an old teddy bear. David noticed she had done everything she could to preserve dignity in the smallest details, even when life didn't make it easy. "Ready to go?" he asked. "Yes," she replied simply. The drive to the clinic was quiet. Neither of them said much, but it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, like both were lost in thoughts they didn't know how to say aloud. At the clinic, the doctor examined Leo carefully. He had a mild cold and slight signs of undernourishment, not serious, but something to watch with better nutrition. David listened closely, jotting down notes. He watched Emily nod attentively, ask dozens of small questions, like any devoted mother would. When they left the clinic, David offered to take them to breakfast. Emily hesitated, then nodded. And it was during that seemingly ordinary breakfast in a quiet little cafe on a rainy New York morning that David casually mentioned a small detail, something that seemed harmless at first, but it would lead to a revelation neither of them could have prepared for. The cafe they chose was a small, quiet spot tucked into the corner of a sleepy street. Outside, the drizzle continued, but inside, warm yellow lights and the scent of toasted bread gave everything a strange sense of comfort. Emily chose a seat by the window, with Leo in her lap, absent-mindedly playing with her fingers. David ordered scrambled eggs on toast and warm milk for Leo. He and Emily only had coffee. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. It was a comfortable silence, the kind where no words were needed. Then, as if to break the calm, David spoke. "Last year, my company had a real estate project in this area. An old school was bought out to make space for a commercial center." His tone was light, casual. He had no idea that each word was cutting deep into the woman sitting across from him. Emily looked up, her face subtly changing. "What school?" she asked quietly. David frowned, trying to recall. "I think Roosevelt Elementary, on the corner of 83rd and the Avenue." Emily froze. She set her coffee cup down slowly. "Roosevelt Elementary?" she repeated, her voice nearly a whisper. David nodded, still unaware. Emily stared at him, and for the first time since they met, there was no warmth in her eyes. "That was where I taught. My school. Its demolition is the reason I lost my job." Time stopped. The rain outside, the clink of cutlery, the laughter from a nearby table, it all faded into silence. David froze. "Emily, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know it was your school." "But who are you?" she said, her voice trembling. "You're the head of that company. You destroyed the place I once called home." David fumbled for his phone, digging through emails and reports, hoping that somehow an explanation could undo the damage. "I only saw reports. Terms like underutilized property, high potential land. I didn't know there were people behind those words." Emily stood, still holding Leo, who looked between the two adults, confused. "You didn't know?" Her laugh cracked like glass. "You changed everything, my job, my stability, my future, and you didn't even know my name." David stood too, wanting to stop her, but not daring to touch her. "Emily, please, just let me explain." "No," she cut him off. I thought you were kind. But this is just a circle. You saved me from a hole you dug yourself." David was speechless. There were no words that could soothe this moment. Emily looked at him one last time. This time, there was no hope in her eyes, only deep, aching disappointment. "We have nothing more to say, David." And then she turned, walked out of the cafe with Leo in her arms, and carried with her the piece of David's heart he'd only just realized was still there. David sat alone in the cafe, at the very table where everything had just fallen apart. His coffee was still warm, but he couldn't lift his hand to drink it. He felt like a statue, frozen, hollow, and cracked from the inside out. He had lost Emily, lost Leo, lost something he hadn't even fully had, a fragile hope that maybe life could start over, that it could be more than numbers and boardrooms. He once believed that sincere regret was enough, that good intentions could patch over old wounds. But he had been wrong. Some cuts don't sit on the surface, they anchor themselves deep in the heart. And he, unknowingly, had made them. David rubbed his temples, waves of emotion crashing through him. He could still see Emily's face, the way she looked at him one last time, not with anger, but with hurt, like she had placed one final drop of trust in him, and he had let it slip through his fingers. He deserved her silence. He knew that. But in that same moment, something stirred inside him, not the instinct to defend himself, but the need to make it right, not out of guilt, but because he wanted to be worthy of the trust he had broken. He couldn't change the past, but he could decide what would happen next. And for the first time in his life, David Morgan, the man who once believed he was untouchable, knew he had to do something far greater with his life, not just to be forgiven, but to be forgivable. The next 3 days were the longest of David Morgan's life. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, Emily's face appeared, her pained expression, the choked words as she left the cafe, and the way she held Leo close as if protecting the last piece of her world. At the office, he couldn't focus. Meetings passed in a blur. Stock reports went unread, emails unanswered. Even Carmen, his trusted assistant of 15 years, noticed the shift. "Mr. Morgan," she said gently one late afternoon as he stood silently before the glass wall overlooking the city. "What's going on with you? I've never seen you like this." David didn't turn around. His voice was barely a whisper. "I think I hurt someone. Someone good. Someone I should never have hurt." Carmen waited, then stepped closer. "You're talking about Emily, aren't you?" He gave a small nod. "And I think I ruined her life before I ever even knew her name." He told Carmen everything, from the first dinner at Green's Diner to the devastating realization that his company had bought and demolished the very school where Emily had once taught. Carmen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she let out a long breath and placed a hand on his shoulder. "So what are you going to do now?" David turned to her, eyes filled with a kind of determination she hadn't seen in years. "I'm going to fix it. Whatever it takes. I want to give back what I took." "I support you," Carmen said, "but you're going to have to go beyond apologies. She doesn't need promises. She needs action." David nodded. "I know." That afternoon, he asked Carmen to retrieve the full archive on the Roosevelt Project, the school his company had acquired and torn down. He wanted every detail: the sale date, the purchase price, the number of teachers displaced, the students relocated. The numbers, once just figures on a report, now came alive as real lives. Each name, a story, a loss. David sat alone in his office until nearly midnight. As he reached the final page of an old local newspaper, a line from an anonymous former teacher stopped him cold. "A school isn't just a building, it's a family. And when they tore it down, they didn't just take my job, they took the piece of my heart I gave to those kids." David closed his eyes. He didn't need to guess. He knew those were Emily's words. He reread it 3 times. Each word felt like it was carved into his chest. And for the first time, he realized his empire had been built on someone else's ruins. And in that moment, he knew exactly what he had to do. Not for forgiveness, but because for the first time, he truly wanted to become the kind of man who deserved someone's trust. The next day, David didn't wait another minute. He knew what he had to do. And if he was going to start, it had to begin with the woman who had made him see himself clearly again, Emily Rivera. He called. She didn't answer. He texted. No reply. He emailed, just one quiet line. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to listen." Still nothing. David didn't blame her. She had every right to be angry, to disappear from his life forever. But he couldn't walk away. Not this time. So he returned to the place where it all began, Green's Diner. The diner looked the same, the warm yellow lights, the familiar scent of home-cooked food. But Mrs. Green, when she saw David enter, didn't wear the same gentle smile as before. "You've got some nerve coming back here," she said, firm but not unkind. "I'm not here to apologize with words," David replied, meeting her gaze. "I'm here to ask for a chance." She crossed her arms, studying him. "Emily cried all night that day. Did you know that?" David nodded. "I know, and that's why I can't stay silent." She sighed. "She still comes here, every evening, 8 o'clock sharp. But if she doesn't want to speak to you, I won't force her." "I'm not asking for forgiveness today," David said. "I just want her to see that I've truly changed." Mrs. Green looked him over once more, then gave a small nod. "Fine. Sit over there. Corner booth, near the window. Don't say anything until she's ready." David thanked her. He sat, nerves buzzing like a child waiting to face a parent after doing something terribly wrong. The clock ticked closer to 8:00. The bell over the door rang with its familiar chime. Emily entered, holding Leo. She looked tired, her eyes still shadowed with pain. She didn't see David at first. She walked toward her usual table in the back corner. Mrs. Green greeted her, then gave a small glance in David's direction. A subtle signal. "Your moment." David stood. His heart was pounding. The first step is always the hardest. David walked toward the table slowly, unsure how Emily would react. When she looked up and met his eyes, her expression shifted. Surprise, then anger, then confusion. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice low but firm. "Just give me 5 minutes," he said gently. "If after that you want me to leave, I will, and I won't come back." Emily stared at him for a long second, then gave a small nod. 5 minutes? David sat down. His hands trembled slightly as he opened his leather case and pulled out a stack of documents. I've completed the process of returning the old Roosevelt School property to the city. The commercial project has been canceled. I've also donated $2 million to the Public School Improvement Fund to rebuild the campus with full classrooms, a library, and even a free meal program for the kids. He passed her the signed paperwork. Emily flipped through the pages. Her expression had shifted, not anger now, but astonishment. I also proposed you as the new principal, David added. Full leadership. You deserve that. Emily was silent. She looked into his eyes as if searching for a hint of manipulation, a hidden agenda, but saw only truth. You didn't have to do any of this, she said quietly. I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because it was right, because of you, because of Leo, because I couldn't let it end like that. Leo, now seated beside her, looked up at David. He smiled and suddenly said, "Daddy." Emily froze. So did David. "What did you say?" she whispered, voice trembling. Leo pointed at David. "Daddy took me to the doctor. Daddy brought soup. Daddy." "Nice." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. David couldn't speak. He bowed his head slightly. After a long pause, Emily finally spoke. "All right, I'll give you a chance, but on one condition." David looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Anything. No expensive gifts, no fixing everything with money. If you want to stay, it has to be because we can become a family, not a business deal." David nodded firmly. "I promise." Emily let out a long breath, like releasing something she'd been carrying for far too long. She reached out her hand. David took it, not too tightly, not in desperation, just enough to start again. Inside the little diner, under the warm golden light and the soft clinking of silverware on porcelain, a small moment had just marked the biggest turning point in David Morgan's life. Emily's hand in his didn't make any grand promises, but the fact that she didn't pull away, that she let him stay, was the greatest gift he'd ever been given. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. He knew there was still so much to prove, so many wounds that would need time to heal. But for the first time in years, David wasn't thinking about financial reports or million-dollar contracts. He was thinking about Leo's laughter, about Emily's deep brown eyes, and about a little school waiting to come back to life. Somewhere deep in his heart, he knew this was the real beginning, not the beginning of a relationship, but the beginning of a different kind of life, with real values, real people, and a love that asked for nothing but truth. 6 months later, the courtyard of Roosevelt Elementary, once abandoned and nearly torn down, now glowed under the sunlight and the joyful laughter of children. New wooden benches lined the paths, colorful flower beds bloomed brightly, and the American flag fluttered proudly in the breeze. A freshly painted sign read, "Roosevelt Elementary, where dreams are grown." At the heart of the schoolyard, a small ceremony was taking place. No champagne, no extravagant gowns, no press or media, just family, friends, students, teachers, and real love. Emily entered the courtyard in a simple white dress, holding Leo's tiny hand. On a small platform beside the flagpole, David stood waiting. His gray suit was modest, but his eyes sparkled brighter than ever. Leo was the unofficial ring-bearer, dashing around the guests and shouting, "Mommy, Daddy, it's time." Laughter filled the courtyard. They were married in the very place that had once torn them apart, and now had become the place where everything began again. After the ceremony, Emily officially became the principal of Roosevelt, leading with a heart full of compassion and courage. David, once a cold businessman obsessed with profit margins and power, now devoted his life to rebuilding what he once tore down, brick by brick, heart by heart. Leo, in his tiny white shirt, ran around the schoolyard like it was his own kingdom. He called out to his mom and dad with all the innocence and happiness a child should know. As the celebration wound down, Emily stood beside David, eyes lifted to the endless blue sky. She whispered, You know what? It all started with a question that embarrassed me. Can I eat your leftovers, sir? But I ended up with a life full of love. David gently squeezed her hand, and I found myself through you and Leo. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was proof that sometimes the greatest beginnings are born from the smallest, most broken moments.